As I have for every movie in the Chucky franchise, I'm gonna go over everything you might have missed in season 1 of Chucky. With 8 episodes, there's a lot to cover, so let's start at the beginning with the opening title sequence. Each episode has a unique title animation that plays over the theme song, and this theme song may sound familiar because it's actually a reorchestrated version of a track from the original score for Child's Play 2. Let me play them both for comparison. Here's the theme from the show. And here's a clip from Child's Play 2. I'll take out the dialogue so you can just focus on the music. Choosing a track from Child's Play 2 lets the viewer know that this season is a tribute to that second movie. The season features more elements of Child's Play 2 than we've seen since, well, Child's Play 2. Just as Curse of Chucky was a sort of second coming of the first Child's Play, Chucky Season 1 would be a sort of second coming of its sequel. Not only is the story very similar, Child's Play 2 is about Andy going to a foster home where he's hunted by Chucky, and Chucky Season 1 is about Jake Wheeler receiving foster care from his aunt and uncle after his dad is electrocuted by Chucky, but the visual design of the show also calls back to that 1990 sequel.
Chucky's look, we've taken a lot of pains to mimic the specific look of the doll himself from Child's Play 2. I was just talking to someone who said it's the creepiest version, but weirdly also the cutest.
In this featurette, series creator Don Mancini explains why he chose the second movie as an inspiration for the series.
I've heard over the years from fans telling me that Child's Play 2 is their favorite. Now with the TV series, it was the perfect opportunity to dig into where those characters are now, 30 years on.
This was the first time we got to see Andy and Kyle work together since then, and the show even uses their original actors, Alex Vincent and Christine Elise. Kyle even brings back her signature hat from that movie. There are many, many more parallels and Easter eggs I can point out, so let's go through the series and explore all of its secrets. To learn about the meaning behind the advertisements at the school, how Halloween decorations foreshadow specific deaths, who this realtor really is, the significance of every name on these tombstones, and so much more. Stick around to the end of this video. Welcome to Things You Missed. They say you can't keep a good guy down. A lot of times when a series gets a reboot, fans have to say goodbye to any hopes of revisiting the original continuity. The Chucky franchise got that reboot with Child's Play in 2019, but the original voodoo-powered Chucky was not ready to give up the spotlight. Don Mancini, who has been with this franchise since the beginning, had been doing some work in TV on the show Hannibal, and was inspired to try Chucky as a weekly show as well. Now, instead of an 80-minute movie, we have a 6-hour season to analyze, which means there's more room for a ton of things you missed. Let's get into them. The series opens with this POV shot of the young Charles Lee Ray going upstairs and seeing his mother combing her hair. This is the first of many homages to the Halloween franchise. The original Halloween opens with the POV of the young Michael Myers going upstairs and seeing his sister combing her hair in the exact same fashion. We've seen Chucky films steal Halloween openings before. Seed of Chucky has pretty much the same opening, and Cult of Chucky has a psychiatric patient transfer at the beginning, much like several Halloween movies. So there are always a lot of Halloween references in Chucky movies, just because Michael Myers is like a supernatural slasher forefather to Chucky. But this time there are even more than usual because the series takes place around Halloween. By the way, can you guess the only other Chucky film to take place in October? It's Child's Play 2. Another Halloween reference is the inclusion of a character named Dr. Mixter. This brings to mind the Doctor from Halloween 2.
Try to relax, Lori. Dr. Mixter will have you stitched up in no time.
I'm sure it's no mistake that when we first hear Dr. Mixter's name brought up by Lexi's mom, she's actually speaking about Halloween, the holiday.
Besides, Dr. Mixter says that Halloween is the perfect opportunity for you girls to bond.
By the way, this is not the first time that we've seen a Chucky character named after a Halloween character. In Child's Play 3, we met Colonel Cochran, who is named after Connell Cochran from Halloween 3. I may have neglected to mention that in my Child's Play 3 video. Another parallel can be seen in episode 2, where we see a flashback to Charles Lee Ray in 1965, where he dresses up as a clown for Halloween. In the movie Halloween, Michael Myers also dresses up as a clown for a Halloween night in the 1960s. In that same scene, we see Charles bite into an apple with a razor in it. A kid in Halloween 2 does the same thing. I'll note that this might not be a reference to the Halloween 2 kid, it could just be about the urban legend that the Halloween 2 kid is based on. It's the same thing with Lexi and her sister. Lexi has plans on Halloween night, but her parents tell her that they're going out, so she has to babysit Caroline, and she's annoyed. I found myself wondering if this is supposed to be a reference to Halloween 4, where Rachel Carruthers is forced to babysit her adoptive sister Jamie while her parents go out on Halloween night, thus ruining her plans for the evening. There might be another Halloween connection involving Lexi and her sister the next night when she's putting Caroline down to bed, and Caroline asks her to sing a lullaby.
bedtime. You have to sing to me.
So Lexi sings Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult, the same song that Laurie and Annie listened to in the car in Halloween 1. And as much as I like the song, I'm getting pretty tired of hearing it in movies and TV. We already heard it in Halloween, Zombieland, Gone Girl, and Scream. And that's just covering the movies that I analyzed here on Things You Missed. Forget the other 76 productions that it's been in so far, according to IMDb. In the flashback where we see the death of Charles Lee Ray's parents, his mom tries to hide him in a shuttered closet, just like the one that Laurie Strode hides in Halloween. And in episode 4, Chucky terrorizes the Hackensack Memorial Hospital, which is abbreviated to HMH, just like the Haddonfield Memorial Hospital from Halloween 2 and Halloween Kills. Later on, Halloween's final girl comes up in a discussion between Devon and Jake about horror movies.
Favorite final girl?
Laurie Strode, hands down.
Jamie Lee's gonna win the Saturn this year.
Dude, she's gonna win an Oscar. She's magnificent.
Spoiler alert, Jamie Lee Curtis did not win an Oscar for Halloween Kills. At the time of recording this video, the Saturn Awards have not yet taken place. Shortly after this conversation, Chucky breaks into the house and kills the lights, something that Michael Myers is known for doing. And finally, we have Andy and Kyle stopping at an auto repair shop / gas station, and Andy strands her there for her own good. Michael Myers strands Dr. Loomis at an auto repair gas station in Halloween 4. And that is not the end of this video. That's just the end of the Halloween references. So let's get back to the beginning of the series when Jake is first buying Chucky at the yard sale. According to this video with Don Mancini, this is actually Tiffany crossing through right here. She wears this red coat later in the season, so she's probably checking in to make sure that an innocent, like Jake, is the one who ends up with the doll. When Jake walks home from the yard sale, there are a couple more Easter eggs on the podcast that he's listening to. Jake is listening to Devon's podcast Hack and Slash, which according to this graphic, posts new episodes every Tuesday. The Chucky series also released new episodes on Tuesdays. We can see that Jake is currently on episode 8. Chucky season 1 is an 8-episode season. As Devon explains the morbid history of Hackensack, we see graphics on screen that go along with what he's saying. This one, which appears for just one moment, is the same article on the Lakeshore Strangler that Tiffany kept in her trailer in Bride of Chucky. Shortly after that, there's another article, which appears to be from a website written by Ethan Carson. This article appears again in episode 7 on Devon's corkboard. This is our first crew reference Easter egg. Ethan Carson is the art department assistant. Then, after 56 seconds, the podcast ends. That was a short podcast. Jake goes home and we see his room. He's got a poster for a band called Mad Ashes. This might be a clue of things to come. Later on, we see Chucky return with a vengeance after surviving a fire, and similarly, we see Andy's wrath after escaping from an explosion. We also meet Jake's cat, Banksy.
Banksy! Here, Banks!
Banksy is an artist known for his street murals, but he's also worked in many other mediums, like Jake's forte, sculpting. When Banksy bites the dust, so does Jake's sculpture. The next day, Jake brings Chucky to school, and he's picked on by a classmate named Oliver Hayden on the bus. Oliver throws a pair of gym shorts in his face. That's a pretty hostile thing to do, and it reminds me a lot of the extremely hostile kid on the bus in Child's Play 2, which if you watch my channel, you know I always have to bring up. Why are you so hostile? Oliver is also wearing yellow, so he matches the kid that was throwing stuff on the bus in Child's Play 2. Just because this season is themed around the second film, that doesn't mean that each of the others isn't referenced. In the cafeteria at school, there's an advertisement for a hearty bowl of chili, the same meal that the Pierce family eats in the famous chili scene from Curse of Chucky.
I love chili.
This is amazing.
I can't believe there's no meat in this. And it's so hearty.
Speaking of not having meat, the banner also advertises a Beyond Meat burger. That might be the scariest thing of this whole episode. The drinks being served are a bright red punch, cause there's gonna be blood. When Devon sits by Jake and asks what he's watching, Jake says that he's watching The Vampire Diaries. Now I haven't seen The Vampire Diaries, but this Reddit post from Caesar Daniel 02 talks about how there are a lot of similarities between the two series. Both are part of this teen horror genre with an expanding network of villains. Vampires can turn people into fellow vampires to grow their ranks, and Chucky can possess dolls or people to grow his ranks. The post also talks about similarities between the characters, like Jake and Jeremy, such as how both lose their parents. I'll link to the post in the description if you want to read further. After receiving a call from Andy Barkley warning him about Chucky, Jake looks up good guy doll violence on a search engine called Search. If you've been keeping up with my Chucky episodes, then you're already familiar with the strange handling of website brand names in the world of Chucky. For example, Curse is careful to specify that Nika uses internet search instead of Google. But one movie later in Cult, Andy name drops Google. The series has similar inconsistencies. Chucky stalks Lexi on a social media site called SquarePix, but later on specifically uses the words
Instagram influencers.
There's even a joke where the kids try to find Andy Barclay on social media by searching Insta, Snap, and Twitter, and then Devon eventually finds him on Facebook, and he's laughing because of course the old person would be on Facebook. They should have checked there first.
Hey Lexi, he's on Facebook.
Anyway, as Jake is looking into the Chucky doll's past on search, each of the results references an incident from a previous Chucky movie. The first 4 are from Child's Play. The headlines read, 6-year-old boy says Chucky did it, which is Andy, urban legend Charles Lee Ray and Chucky, boy's babysitter dies in freak accident, which is Aunt Maggie, and explosion on South Side leaves 1 dead, which is Eddie Caputo. The next one is about the teacher from Child's Play 2, and we get a new piece of information. We've always known that Andy's teacher was Miss Kettlewell, but for the first time they reveal her first name, Elizabeth. The last result talks about the PlayPal CEO from Child's Play 2 and 3, Mr. Sullivan, and we learn his first name as well, Haskell. You hear that? That's the sound of wiki pages being updated across the internet. Jake confirms that his doll is alive the same way that Karen Barclay did in the first movie, by discovering that he's been able to talk without batteries. His response is to throw Chucky in the trash. What the hell is that gonna do when you already know he's alive? I think this shot is here more for the sake of keeping up with the tradition of characters throwing Chucky in the trash. Kyle does it in 2, Colonel Cochran does it in 3, Sarah does it in Curse, Claire does it in Cult, Andy does it in the remake, and in episode 5, Lexi's dad also attempts to throw Chucky in the trash. Obviously, Jake trashing his doll doesn't work, and he appears shortly thereafter at the school talent show.
I see some familiar faces in the crowd tonight.
From this line, we cut to a shot of Lexi's family, and indeed, there is a familiar face there, because her father is played by an actor named Michael Theriault, who also played Dr. Foley in the previous installment, Cult of Chucky. The split-screen editing technique in this scene is also something that was taken from Cult. Speaking of familiar faces, there are a lot of repeats in the crowd. A lot of doppelgangers in Hackensack, I guess. They might have been low on extras, or maybe this was some kind of COVID precaution. Chucky makes it appear as if Jake is performing a ventriloquist act on stage. It's the same trick used by Glenn at the beginning of Seed of Chucky. That night, the power goes out in a storm, and Jake's dad goes to the basement to use the breaker box. We're shown this shot of a spider web in the foreground. It's the first shot we see of Jake's basement, and it's just like the first shot we see of the attic in Curse of Chucky and Seed of Chucky, both of which also have us looking through a spider web. The first episode ends with the first on-screen kill of the series, which is Jake's dad, Lucas Wheeler, getting electrocuted. Remember how I said this series has an emphasis on Child's Play 2? Well, an electrocution is also the first death in that movie. Because he's now an orphan, Jake would be moved into his aunt and uncle's house, which contains many more things you missed.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
When Jake Wheeler finally has a moment to himself again, he has a lot of questions for his retro doll.
Talk to me. I said talk to me, damn it.
It's almost the same line that Andy's mom confronted the Chucky doll with in Child's Play.
Say something, damn it!
We next see Jake a week later on Halloween. He and his cousin Junior get home from school, and Junior's having some trouble with the security system. It turns out that Junior's dad changed the code, and Jake lets him know. Junior is essentially no longer the only child, and he feels a sense of jealousy as a result, and this fuels the rivalry between them. The tension between the two boys builds throughout the episode, and it eventually leads to Mr. and Mrs. Wheeler sitting down to discuss if it's actually a good idea to look after Jake. Can we just pause it here? If you're a parent, take note. This is a terrible place to have a secret conversation.
He's not a violent kid, he's just traumatized.
We're all traumatized. I mean, are we even qualified to look after a boy like this?
This is the exact same situation that Andy's caretakers found themselves in after taking him in Child's Play 2.
Are we even qualified to take care of a boy like this?
And they later have a conversation about it that is also eavesdropped upon.
You have to admit he's a very troubled little boy, and he obviously has not come to terms with this whole doll thing.
Going forward, the Wheeler house would become the main location in the series. It would be the stage for 3 deaths and 1 additional funeral, and the cherry blossom designs all over the walls serve as a symbol for this. They almost look like splatters of blood sprayed upon the walls. It's also fitting that they have 4 skeletons on display for Halloween, representing the 4 members of the family who would die this season: Bree, Logan, Junior, and the maid, Annie.
Annie really was a part of this family.
The ones in the middle are a couple, Bree and Logan, which are the middle 2 deaths chronologically. Jake confronts Chucky about Annie's death, but Chucky denies the allegation.
Swear to God, I didn't kill her.
However, if you've seen Curse, you know that swearing to God means nothing to Chucky.
There is no God.
Chucky tries to convince Jake with an offer of friendship.
I'm your friend to the end.
You get f***ed with that shit. I'm not 6 years old.
That's a reference to Child's Play 1, which takes place on Andy's 6th birthday.
We're friends to the end, remember?
Chucky's manipulation tactics continue as he tries to relate to Jake using his sexuality.
You know, I have a queer kid.
you have a kid.
Chucky seems to be talking about Glenn and Glenda from Seed of Chucky. If you haven't seen Seed, it's about Chucky and Tiffany's child who was born as a doll and thus has no private parts. So Chucky and Tiffany argue about if it's a boy or a girl, causing the kid to switch between the two identities, Glenn and Glenda. We haven't seen Glenn or Glenda since then, but I'm guessing switching between the two alter egos may have caused the grown-up Glenn and Glenda to be considered bisexual, which is probably what Chucky is referencing here. Glenda actually gets a second reference in episode 8.
What's that?
Isn't it cute? My darling Glenda gave it to me. They have exquisite taste.
Meanwhile, over at Lexi's house, Caroline has developed an obsession with Chucky ever since seeing him insult her older sister at the talent show. There's no way in hell a little kid could draw this well, but the whole thing reminds me of Madeline from Cult of Chucky, who also became attached to the doll and started sketching pictures of him.
Baby, can you remember his name?
Chucky.
Yes, that's right.
That might be the dumbest thing I've heard. You think she can remember and reproduce every little detail about him, including the text on his pockets, yet she wouldn't be able to remember his name? What the hell is wrong with you? Why would you ask that? Can you remember his name? That evening, Devon's mom breaks the news about what happened to Annie. Devon is a true crime buff, and his room is decorated with news clippings about famous criminals. He seems to have a particular interest in the Zodiac case. I covered Zodiac here on Things You Missed, and one of the things I mentioned in that movie was how they used real newspaper clippings in the film to make everything look as authentic as possible. Perhaps as an homage, the same is done here. Some of the other true crime cases that he has on display are real articles as well. Despite Annie's untimely death, Junior still decides to go over to Oliver's Halloween party. When his ride pulls up, there's a cameo appearance from Don Mancini as the Uber driver. It's hard to tell if it's him, but he confirmed on Twitter. When we arrive on the scene of Oliver's party, it's gotta be the most lit middle school party in the history of the world. When I was in middle school, I don't remember any of my classmates pulling up in a Maserati. I mean, I've been to parties thrown by some of the biggest YouTubers, and even those are not on this level. Except for my party. My party was the greatest. There are at least 3 kids at this party dressed up in army gear. The third movie takes place at a military academy. Away from the action, Chucky and Caroline have already made friends, and Chucky has already begun to try to convince her to kill her sister.
Mommy says real killing is bad.
Yeah, well, Mommy's full of shit.
Mommy says it isn't nice to swear.
Mommy's working her way up my list pretty quick.
If you're keeping count at home, this is now the 3rd child that has taken issue with Chucky's colorful vocabulary.
Charles, stop swearing.
Chucky, stop cursing.
We actually see that Chucky first began teaching profanity to children as a 14-year-old when he was staying at the foster home for wayward boys.
How's the story, boys?
Fantastic.
Language, young man. Where did you learn that?
When Jake realizes that Chucky is missing, he rushes to the party, but before he finds what he's looking for, the crowd throws him into a closet with Devon. There's a false scare with the little mannequin wearing a hockey mask, maybe a reference to Jason from Friday the 13th. Before he's able to find Chucky, Jake comes across this horrific scene where Lexi impersonates his father's death. I don't really know how she figured out all of these details about what he was wearing, how he died, and exactly what it all looked like when Mr. Wheeler met his fate, since the only one there to witness Lucas's death other than Jake was Chucky himself. But in the next episode, the creators of the show would include a ton of jabs at one Disney franchise that has been in a long rivalry with Child's Play and Chucky. By the 3rd episode, Chucky has convinced Jake to kill Lexi. Well, I guess Lexi did most of the convincing herself. He tracks her phone and plans to jump her while she's jogging in the middle of the woods, but it turns out to be Junior, who had grabbed Lexi's phone and apparently went on a run with it instead of just giving it back to her first.
Hey, babe. Oh, thanks for grabbing it.
And also, they are conveniently wearing matching hoodies. This is all clearly done just to trick the audience, which I'm never a fan of. However, the matching outfits do act as a barometer for their relationship going forward. At this point, early in the 3rd episode, Junior and Lexi are really close because they're both kind of united in their disdain of Jake. But at the end of the episode, Lexi learns that Chucky is alive and trying to kill her, so she's forced to team up with Jake and Devon, causing her and Junior to drift apart. By episode 6, Junior feels that she has abandoned him, and he's thinking about breaking up with her. In the breakup scene, Junior is wearing his matching hoodie, but Lexi is not, a sign that they're no longer in sync as they once were. We can also see this in the way that the scene is shot. The wide lens emphasizes the distance between them, and Junior leaves towards the most destroyed part of the house. He's going down a dark path, leaving Lexi alone in the middle to choose her direction. Chucky continues to try to manipulate Jake into becoming a killer. He taunts him for having missed his chance to take out Lexi.
It's called completion anxiety.
Avid Chucky fans may remember where Chucky first learned about completion anxiety. It was from Nika, who had written her college thesis on the topic and used it to get under his skin back in Curse.
So you never actually killed Andy Barclay, did you?
What?
No, it's called completion anxiety. It's very common in males.
Jake does end up relenting and giving the doll to Lexi, who uses it to appease her sister. I don't get why the parents are acting like a child playing with a toy in the most normal way possible is some kind of breathtaking thing.
Great. What's a little genius doing now?
Shh, look.
I don't get it. She's just playing with a toy like any kid would. Caroline's supposed age is put even more into question later that day when Lexi finds her watching TV.
I thought you were watching Westworld.
Yeah, because Caroline would absolutely be watching a very adult-oriented show like Westworld. This line is obviously here, not because it makes sense in context, but because the creators wanted, once again, to shout out a show that shares similarities with Chucky. Chucky is essentially an animatronic toy that goes on a rampage. Westworld is about animatronic humanoids that go on a rampage. Junior also brings up Westworld in episode 5.
It's a crazy theme park with these hot robots and you can do anything you want to them.
Though it's kind of unclear to me if the creators of Chucky are fans of Westworld or if they're trying to make fun of it, because apparently Chucky says that life is too short to watch it.
Chucky says life's too short. He wants to watch the news.
That's very familiar to the first Child's Play, where Chucky tells Andy that he wants to watch the 9 o'clock news so that he can listen for updates about his former accomplice, Eddie Caputo. In the case of the TV series, he's probably keeping his eyes peeled for stories about Andy Barclay, who was recently found to have escaped Harrogate Psychiatric Hospital. It seems like whenever Chucky is attached to a new kid, he brings out his usual bag of tricks, because there's also a line where Caroline says something horrible and blames it on Chucky.
I didn't say it, Chucky did.
We've heard that before, in Child's Play and in Curse. That is, the original Child's Play, not the 2019 remake. You've probably noticed that there aren't many connections to the 2019 Child's Play, and that's because it's essentially a different series. It's a fresh continuity. However, it did play a big role in a long-standing battle between the Chucky franchise and the Toy Story franchise. Toy Story is an animated film about a kid named Andy whose toys come to life. Obviously, the similarities pretty much end there, but I don't think the producers of Chucky particularly liked the fact that the two franchises share that similarity. If you're curious, no, Andy from Toy Story was not an intentional Child's Play reference. I guess one of the original Pixar employees had a son named Andy. But that didn't stop Chucky from firing back during the marketing campaign for the remake, which was coming out the same weekend as Toy Story 4. Interestingly, Chucky Season 1 keeps the rivalry alive. Not with Andy though, but with Chucky. In a flashback to his childhood, we see the inside of his room. Like Andy in Toy Story, he has a combination of astronaut and cowboy stuff. The hat hanging on his wall is Jesse's hat from Toy Story 2, he has a Viewmaster on his nightstand, the Viewmaster is a character in Toy Story, and he's got little green army men on his dresser, also characters from Toy Story. When we flash back to present, Lexi senses danger, and she notices Chucky's feet poking out from under the window curtain. We've seen this once before in Cult of Chucky, but this time it's only a decoy, allowing him to sneak up and make an attempt on her. It's nice that the series offers a couple of new twists, rather than just constantly repeating moments that we've already seen in the original 7 Chucky movies. The last thing we see from that night is the headstone of Charles Lee Ray, confirming that Jake's dad was indeed buried in the same graveyard we were first introduced to in Bride of Chucky, although it looks different than it did back then. My theory is maybe the original got vandalized and they had to replace it.
Why do they do it? Goddamn kids.
Episode 4 begins at Hackensack Hospital, where many characters are recovering after Chucky started a fire at Lexi's party. For some reason, it seems like everyone is being treated besides Lexi herself, which doesn't make sense to me because she was closest to where the fire started. You would think if anyone got bronchitis, it would be her, but I suppose she did not have time for that.
Look, anyone who's told the truth about Chucky's either been put away or worse. Mostly worse.
Just for fun, let's review. Who has told the truth about Chucky and were they put away? Andy Barclay, put away. Karen Barclay, put away. Lieutenant Preston, dead. Jesse and Jade Miller, alive as far as we know. Jennifer Tilly, supernaturally possessed. Nika Pierce, put away, then supernaturally possessed. I'll assume that Kyle, Ronald Tyler, and Kristen DeSilva kept their mouths shut despite knowing about Chucky. Meanwhile, Devon's mom pays him a visit.
I'm a mom. I'll be worried the rest of my life.
Technically true. Afterwards, Jake is waiting for Devon in the hallway when a pink soccer ball is kicked in his direction from seemingly no one. Naturally, being me, CZsWorld, I thought about The Shining, when Danny Torrance is playing in the hallway of the Overlook Hotel and a pink ball mysteriously rolls up to him. At first, I wasn't sure if they were trying to reference The Shining here, but I'm pretty sure it is intentional, because there are a lot more Shining references throughout the season. For example, when Tiffany and Chucky first moved to Chicago in the flashback, their room number is room 237, which is the most haunted room in the 1980 movie version of The Shining. When Chucky breaks into Lexi's house, he drops his own take on the famous "Here's Johnny" line.
Here's
Chucky.
A line that he almost said in Seed, but couldn't think of anything to say.
I can't think of a thing to say.
And in episode 8, when the army of Chuckies is asking the main Chucky about which children are acceptable to kill, one of them asks,
"What about twins?"
The Shining is famous for showing the graphic mutilation of a creepy set of twins, and this is immediately followed up with Chucky laughing as we hear the main theme of The Shining. We hear more music from The Shining during the next scene when the army of dolls is being loaded into the back of a truck. But before we get there is an interesting detail on the badges of the employees at the Hackensack Memorial Hospital. Given that his mom is part of the police force, Devon finds out that one of the victims at the party, Oliver, didn't die in the fire. He was actually stabbed to death.
Either way, there's a killer out there right now, running around Hackensack.
This is the face of a kid with a true crime podcast trying to act like he's not excited by that. The doctors have to perform a bronchoscopy on Junior, and I noticed that the badges worn by the medical staff looked familiar. They used the same layout as the badges from the psychiatric hospital in Cult of Chucky. I doubt that's something we're even supposed to notice. It's probably just as simple as they had leftover props in storage somewhere, but I like that it makes the world feel cohesive, so I'm including it in my already long video. To calm his nerves, Junior sings "We Got the Beats" by the Go-Go's. Funny how all these Gen Z middle school kids in 2021 love all this pop culture stuff from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and in some cases even older stuff. I already mentioned Lexi singing Blue Oyster Cult's 1976 hit. Devon watches Cape Fear from 1991. Jake has a poster from the 80s movie The Outsiders in his room. The mayor plans to donate good guy dolls to children in need. What kid is going to be excited about a 33-year-old doll that was discontinued over 20 years ago? She also does a fundraiser by showing the 1931 Frankenstein. They don't even show 90-year-old movies in LA, the movie capital of the country. There's no way you're selling out a full house for a Frankenstein screening in New Jersey. Jake even compares Chucky to Teddy Ruxpin at one point. Teddy Ruxpin was an actual animatronic doll from the 80s who, similar to the Good Guy doll, had his own cartoon series. I think the Good Guy doll in Child's Play is inspired 50% by Teddy Ruxpin and 50% by the My Buddy doll, which I've already talked about in my Child's Play things you missed. I get that Jake is a retro doll collector, but there's no way he'd know about Teddy Ruxpin, come on. Also, interesting side note, when I was searching for clips to show in this video, I came across this Teddy Ruxpin commercial from 1985 where a scientist tries to bring the doll to life like Frankenstein. I don't think that's necessarily why they chose Frankenstein as the movie featured in episodes 7 and 8, but I'll get into that when we get to the end of the season. My main point is the only reason that the kids in the show know about 80s stuff is because the creators of the franchise are older now and they're putting in references to media that influence them. Despite all of this though, Junior does not recognize Jennifer Tilly from Bound.
Aren't you a little young to have seen Bound?
Anyway, Devon gets bored in his hospital room and decides to do some research on Chucky. This picture of Tiffany is literally just a screenshot from Bride of Chucky. Like, there's no reason that this should canonically exist on the internet. They do this a lot in Saw, so I won't dwell on it too much, but it always bothers me that they can't just use another picture or make something in Photoshop, or, you know, just take a picture of the younger actress playing that same character who is literally in this season in a flashback. But before we get to that flashback, there's an even earlier flashback of Charles Lee Ray's time at the foster home as a teenager. He looks after some of the younger kids, and they roleplay Peter Pan, a story about a magical boy who lives in Neverland, a place where children stay young forever. And they never have to listen to anyone about anything, because it's all been done and it's all been said. They're the coolest kids, and they take what they can get. It's interesting to me that even at this point, Charles had this desire for eternal youth, because that's basically what he achieved in 1988 by transferring his soul into the body of a good guy doll, forever giving him the form of a child. Charles leads the kids to stumble upon the body of the janitor, who he refers to as Captain Hook, and everyone runs away except for one boy, who we later find out to be Eddie Caputo, the man who was supposed to be Charles' getaway driver the night he was killed in the opening of Child's Play. But back in the present, Lexi and Jake are searching the burned house for the remnants of Chucky.
What are you waiting for?
I don't know where your room is.
Bet he's the only boy in the school who can say that. A detective comes by, discovers Chucky, and refers to him as an ugly f***ing doll. I think this is a callback to the woman who finds Chucky in the elevator back in the original Child's Play.
Ugly doll.
Before long, I'm pretty sure every single moment from the original movie will have come back as some kind of Easter egg or reference if they keep the series up. Like, for example, how in the original, Andy wears good guy's pajamas, and in the show, we eventually come across the pink soccer ball kid, and he's wearing overalls on top of a striped shirt. His outfit resembles the good guy's outfit, but the colors are different. And now is the perfect time to tell you that you can buy this merch. When the detective brings Chucky back to Caroline, he gets distracted by food and eats a powdered donut right over the killer doll. The result is white powder falling down onto Chucky, and I'm pretty sure this is no accident, as this is kind of a running theme in the franchise. The snow in Child's Play, the fluff in Curse of Chucky, then more snow in Cult of Chucky. They're constantly recreating that wintry image. Given that we're in a hospital in this episode, there are obviously going to be a lot of callbacks to Cult of Chucky, which similarly takes place in a mental hospital.
God, I love hospitals.
We know you do, Chucky, but we can't forget that there's also a hospital scene in the original. It's definitely familiar territory, so Chucky knows just where to find some dangerous items.
You might feel a little prick.
This one actually comes from the poster for Cult of Chucky, although I don't think it's ever actually said in the movie. Jake and Lexi eventually decide to see what Devon knows about the Lakeshore Strangler, and he brings up a good point.
He never really strangled anyone. I mean, he was more of like a mangler or a butcher.
Devon?
This is before Devon finds out that the legend of the cursed Chucky doll is more than an urban legend, because we have seen Chucky as a doll strangle people on several occasions.
Nothing like a strangulation to get the circulation going.
But the fact that Devon is the one to bring up this point about strangling might be a dark foreshadowing, as it would be his own mom who is strangled by Chucky later in the story. Meanwhile, Jake, still a prime suspect for the recent murders, is interrogated by Detective Evans. Pretty sure you need a parent or guardian present to question a minor, Mrs. Evans. Lucky for both of them, I guess, they're interrupted by a disturbance from Caroline's room. Chucky had pulled the plug on this machine giving her oxygen, which I find it very hard to believe that a device like this wouldn't have any form of battery backup, but everyone freaks out, especially Mrs. Cross. I'm pretty sure we're supposed to get the idea that she's in a panic, because they keep playing the same audio of her saying, "Please hurry."
Please hurry! Please hurry! Please hurry!
She sounds like you guys trying to get me to finish this video. Another common request I get is people asking me to make more Saw content. I will at some point, but you don't have to wait that long, because there are a couple of Saw Easter eggs right here in the next episode of Chucky. The 5th episode would be titled Little Little Lies. It starts a trend of episode names that parody other works. In this case, the show Big Little Lies, or perhaps the book that it's based on. Chucky once again proclaims his love of hospitals as he swims around in a dump of discarded needles. This isn't the first time that I've talked about someone rummaging through a needle pit, as this is also something that happens in Saw 2. Ever since Scream first came out and started the trend, Chucky has followed suit by referencing as many other popular horror properties as possible, but I believe this is the first Saw reference for the Chuck. We wouldn't have to wait long for the second. At the Hotel Hackensack later in this episode, we see a bald guy in a white t-shirt laying face down in a puddle. He looks exactly like John Kramer when we see him in Saw 1. A few days later, class is back in session, and in science, the lesson is about biotic and abiotic factors. In other words, living and non-living elements of our ecosystem. It seems appropriate because Jake, Lexi, and Devon's biggest hurdle right now is getting people to realize that the Chucky doll is actually alive, which makes Chucky episode 5 kind of feel like Harry Potter number 5, but that's definitely a coincidence. Given that Chucky's face got melted in the fire, Nathan gets Caroline a new good guy doll.
Hi, I'm Tommy.
This is another callback to Child's Play 2, where Andy's foster parents happen to have a good guy doll named Tommy, which Chucky buries in the backyard. There are 50 different names for good guy dolls, and Chucky and Tommy are 2 of them. That evening, there's a lightning storm. If you've been with the Chucky franchise for a while, you know what this means, but if you're new, you may not realize this is a clue that the doll Jake, Devon, and Lexi destroy is no longer the real Chucky. Ever since the first movie, the sign that Chucky has transferred his soul into a new body is the appearance of storm clouds in a great strike of lightning, part of a ritual called the Dambella Chant. Over at the Wheeler house, Junior's dad is working on getting him a trainer for cross-country nationals.
In a week or 2, we're gonna have you back out there running. I even got you a trainer. That guy Dobbs is the best.
We never see or meet Dobbs, so it feels oddly specific that he's mentioned by name. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that this might be a reference to a movie character. Our Child's Play from 1988 was not the first movie called Child's Play. In 1972, a mystery film called Child's Play was released, and it was based off a play of the same name. The main character is named Joseph Dobbs. Maybe this is a reference to that. Also, I just want to add, I love the implication that Lexi's mom doesn't know how to operate the dishwasher without the maid around. No surprise there. This is the episode where we finally see where Chucky first met Tiffany. He walks over to her table and asks,
"Hey, Red, what's new?"
She's not the only one to be called Red. In Seed of Chucky, Jennifer Tilly pursues a relationship with the rapper-producer known as Redman and says,
Thank you, Mr. Man. Oh, could I call you Red?
In Tiffany's case, however, Charles may be calling her Red because she has red hair. You just can't really tell because there's a red light cast on her in both of the scenes she's in before she goes blonde. We jump forward to present day, where Chucky and Tiffany are back making love in the same hotel, both in different bodies than they were in the 80s. That's not me saying that they got fat, like they're literally in different bodies. But in in reality, Tiffany did happen to gain some weight, and Chucky criticizes her eating habits, so she fires back at him with one of her "my mother always told me" catchphrases, something that she's been pulling out since we first met her in Bride. There's another sneaky reference to Bride of Chucky as Principal McVeigh greets everybody coming into the assembly at the school auditorium.
Hey, can we expect those famous everything but the sink cookies this year? Great.
Not knowing what everything but the sink cookies are, I looked it up and discovered it's the name of a recipe created by Martha Stewart, the TV personality who Tiffany idolized throughout Bride of Chucky, until the end.
Martha Stewart!
I noticed that each of the seats in the auditorium have labels on them. I'm guessing this is just the way things were at the location where they filmed this, but I couldn't help but notice that one of them says barber's chair. One of Chucky's victims in Child's Play 3 was killed in a barber's chair. However, I'm gonna call this a coincidence because all of the other chairs have labels on them and none of them have any significant meaning to me as a Chucky franchise viewer. Thought it would just be a fun thing to mention. Much like how I think it's fun that they had the balls to put a meme song in a Chucky episode. This guy's going viral. Get this on the trending page. Don't worry, I blurred it out. Episode 6 is called Cape Queer, a parody of the movie Cape Fear, which Devon can be seen watching, and he takes inspiration from. And we are finally reintroduced to the man himself, Andy Barclay. So in the last episode, Nika was told that the date is November 8th. This episode looks to be on the next day. We don't know for sure, but we can kind of assume that it's the next day, which would be November 9th, Andy's birthday. Andy was first introduced on his 6th birthday, reintroduced the day before his 31st birthday, and now we would be meeting him again on his 39th birthday. Andy and Kyle go to investigate a house where they suspect Chucky might be, and when this little girl brings out her doll, you can see the burned fingers on Chucky's right hand. This tells us that this is the very same doll from Cult of Chucky, which Nika had Dr. Foley hold a lighter up to in an attempt to prove that it was just a doll, which of course was unsuccessful. This means that Andy and Kyle are still hunting down the remaining fragments of Chucky's soul. A male-female soul hunting duo? Sounds familiar. At the end of Cult, we can assume that Buzzcut and Nobod are dead, leaving Hot Hands, Nika Chucky, and Cope Chucky. But Hot Hands is taken out in episode 6, which leaves just Nika Chucky and Cope Chucky, who is presumably the one that belongs to Jake. Not that any of this matters, because they'll never kill the last Chucky off, but I just find it fun to sort out. With Jake's name mostly cleared, the police arrest Mrs. Fairchild. In the middle of her science class? They couldn't have just asked her for a word in the hall instead of arresting her in front of all of the students, especially when they don't even have proof that Miss Fairchild is guilty. I'm really starting to doubt Detective Evans' abilities as a cop. This girl's just happy winter break came early this year. I love how the editor tried to get away with using the same hotel exterior in episode 5 and 6 by just putting a car there in episode 5. Anyway, we come in on Tiffany, who is busy trying to close a suitcase filled with human remains. In Bride of Chucky, she had the same problem with her storage chest, which accidentally still had Damien's hair sticking out shortly before she got help loading it into her car. She gets frustrated with Chucky and screams,
"Get your leg off my suitcase!"
before chopping down with the cleaver. And although she wasn't actually attempting to chop Nika's leg off, this is kind of a preview of things to come, because she does later end up removing all of Nika's limbs so that she can't get away even if Chucky takes over her body. I have more to say about this, but I'll save it for later. This episode also features more flashback material, and this one scene shows off the origin of not 3, but 4 iconic elements that fans have come to love in the Chucky franchise. In a flashback to 1987, we see a younger Chucky and Tiffany purchasing a Pontiac. And when I say purchasing, I mean obtaining. This car is not a big part of the series, not something you would necessarily even notice, but I like that they included it in this scene because Tiffany still has it over a decade later in Bride of Chucky. But it's never driven because she turns into a doll. We do see it again though in Cult of Chucky, as the car that Chucky and Tiffany make their getaway from the asylum in. The color is described as Coronado Red, which Tiffany loves, probably because it'll be less noticeable when blood gets on it. This also marks the first time chronologically that she uses her signature weapon, her nail file. But there's even more that originates from this scene. Roll it.
It's a stunning automobile, and a true classic never goes out of style.
What'd you say?
The car wasn't the only thing Chucky stole, as he would also claim this line as one of his many catchphrases.
A true classic never goes out of style.
A true classic never goes out of style.
Then he makes this clarification.
Technically, it isn't even an antique.
Well, sure it is. Vintage and retro.
This calls all the way back to, well, episode 1, where Jake uses this distinction between vintage and retro to haggle the price of the doll.
What's the difference? About $10.
Then, after stealing the car, Chucky kicks back and reads from the Ultimate Book of Voodoo, which presumably marks the beginning of his interest in voodoo in order to transfer his soul into another body to beat death. Back in the present, Tiffany tests to see if Chucky or Nika is in control by asking about their honeymoon in Niagara. Nika wasn't there for this, so she's calling her bluff in the poker game while simultaneously calling her bluff in the conversation in the situation. After knocking Nika out, she picks up the keys to her recently purchased house. And of course, she's got the same car and she's buying Chucky's old house. I guess she's basking in the nostalgia, but I'm not sure how to feel about her not being goth anymore. This is goth erasure. Hashtag stop goth erasure. If you look on the for sale sign, you'll see that the realtor's name is Gladys Kravitz. She shares a name with the character from the 1960s sitcom Bewitched. Her character is portrayed by Alice Pierce, who shares a name with Alice Pierce from Curse of Chucky. What is the reason for these characters being named in connection with Bewitched? It's not really clear. I'm guessing Don Mancini is just a fan. He actually brought up the show once in an interview with Forbes. Around this time, Andy and Kyle are in Richmond, Virginia, where Jake and his friends make contact with them, and Andy welcomes them to the lucky group of survivors who know about Chucky. Just for fun, that group would include Andy, Karen Barkley, Detective Mike Norris, Detective Jack Santos, Kyle, Kristen DeSilva, Ronald Tyler, Major Ellis, Jesse and Jade Miller, and Nika Pierce. Let me know if you can think of any others. One character who is not so lucky is Bree Wheeler. She gets knocked out of the window of a high-rise building by Chucky, a direct callback to the first kill of the first movie. Both of these characters are the main character's aunt. We also saw an aunt character fall from a great height in Curse. I guess if you have a niece or nephew in the series, get ready to take some fall damage. The song that plays during this scene is called Trampoline. I guess Bree really could have used one here. There are a couple more Child's Play-esque references that evening when the trio sets a trap for Chucky in Logan's house. Chucky gets around this by sneaking in through the chimney, thereby leaving tiny footprints in the dust near the fireplace, just like he did in the spilled flour back in Karen Barkley's kitchen. He proceeds to turn on all the gas in the house, the same tactic that he used in Eddie Caputo's house before blowing it up. I don't know if it would actually work this time because he left the flame on. I'm pretty sure it's only when the gas is on without a flame when you have to worry. Episode 6 ends with the death of Devon's mom, and with the body count really piling up now, the intro of episode 7 fittingly shows the Chucky logo made up of the gravestones of many of the victims of the Chucky franchise. They aren't just victims from this season though, they're victims from the entire history of Chucky. They include Howard Fitzwater, aka Damien Blaylock, Tiffany's goth boyfriend from Bride of Chucky, Sarah Pierce, Nika's mother from Curse of Chucky, Grace Poole, Andy's social worker from Child's Play 2, Tony Gardner, the movie special effects guy from Seed of Chucky, who by the way is also the actual puppeteer and a producer for the franchise. His appearance in Seed of Chucky is actually a cameo. Sean Payton, the police officer who is stabbed with the syringes in episode 4, Eddie Caputo, Charles Lee Ray's accomplice and getaway driver in Child's Play, Warren Kincaid, the police officer and father of Jade in Bride of Chucky, Redman, the rapper slash movie producer from Seed of Chucky, Francis Martinez. We can only assume that this is Father Frank from Curse of Chucky. Frank is sometimes used as a nickname for Francis, and he was Hispanic, so the last name Martinez kind of fits. Philip Simpson, the foster father from Child's Play 2, and Joanne Simpson, the foster mother from Child's Play 2. Due to the stress of losing his wife and all of the strange circumstances of the things going on around him, Logan takes to drinking. When he gets up, we get a clear look at the bottle of Kentucky bourbon that he's working on. If we go all the way back to episode 1 and bring up the lights a little, this is the same alcohol bottle that his brother Lucas was drinking from. I think the show does this to show that he too now has reached rock bottom, just like his brother, and neither one deals with this in a healthy way. Shortly after this, Junior meets Chucky. I would think that this would be proof that Lexi wasn't lying to him back at the auditorium. Roll it.
Jake's doll Chucky was alive, and he killed his dad, and he killed Oliver, and the cop at the hospital, and your housekeeper too, and he wouldn't stop killing, so we broke him into pieces, and now he's dead, so everyone could stop worrying about it.
But I don't know, maybe since Junior didn't believe her, he just forgot. Or maybe he just doesn't care because he's in a lot of pain and he's gonna become evil regardless. As I mentioned before, the climax of the season revolves around this charity screening of James Whale's Frankenstein. I see this as kind of the completion of an analogy. In Bride of Chucky, we saw Tiffany watching Bride of Frankenstein, so it's only natural that in Chucky, she would be watching Frankenstein. In the evening, Tiffany brings a prepared meal by the house.
It's Swedish meatballs.
Which, if you remember back to Bride, was Chucky's favorite food, so it's very possible that she was actually bringing this dish over for him, not for Junior's dad. I do wonder if she obliged to do the dishes this time though. Jake, who is attempting to run away from home, finds himself in a chance encounter with an entirely new good guy doll, and Logan would become the victim of a kill that looks very familiar. As Jake is trying to make like a Fountains of Wayne lyric and get out of Hackensack, he notices a delivery man carrying a good guy doll and buys it off of him for $350. It must have been a pretty crappy job if he's willing to lose it for $350. This one is named Billy and appears not to be possessed by Charles Lee Ray yet. The name Billy could be an homage to Billy Boyd, the actor who voices Glenn in Seed of Chucky, or perhaps it's another Saw reference. Billy the Puppet is one of the only horror movie dolls who is as iconic as Chucky is. Or it could just be a random name. In any event, we now know 6 of the 50 possible good guy names, and I will not rest until we know them all. With the knowledge of where this doll was supposed to be delivered, Jake returns to Hackensack to save his friends from whatever is brewing. I'm comfortable referring to Lexi and Devon as his friends at this point, but Lexi actually refers to them as his family.
What family?
Me? Devon, the family you chose.
Which I get it, character development, Lexi has a heart now, she's doing the whole Dom Toretto meme.
I got family.
But I still find it funny that this is less than a month from her publicly making a mockery of his dad's death and him trying to have her killed. Contrary to that, there's also an interesting wardrobe choice in this scene. Before, I noted how Lexi and Junior wore matching hoodies, but as their relationship deteriorated, she no longer stayed in sync with him. Now she's matching with Jake. Hers is a different color, but they're both wearing the same plaid pattern. I don't think this is alluding to a relationship because Jake is stated to be gay, not bisexual, but who knows. There is that line from his father in episode 1 that suggests that Jake doesn't know what he is yet. In any event, Jake is in time to save his chosen family, but isn't quick enough to save his actual family. In Logan's death scene, Chucky's head rotates around to greet him. This was originally a reference to The Exorcist, but has since become a Chucky thing. It's happened in nearly every entry since Bride of Chucky. Junior is the one to take his dad out though, and he does it by beating him down with the Chucky doll. The scene serves as a reminder of the ending of Seed of Chucky, where Tiffany beats her nanny over the head with the Tiffany doll. This doesn't seem to hurt Chucky very much, which begs the question of if Jake and Lexi's test to see if their dolls were alive by beating them would have even done any good. It seems like fire is the only thing painful enough to make him scream. In an attempt to rescue Devon, Lexi calls them an Uber.
Where's the Uber?
4 minutes.
I got kinda nervous when I heard that, but then I remembered that Ubers are only dangerous in the reboot. After Chucky sees Junior take out his father, we learn that this was his goal all along.
You have no idea how hard it's been getting one of you little shits to step the f up and play.
It seems like Chucky is talking about his Super Bowl line way back in episode 2.
It's the Super Bowl of slaughter.
This turns out to be the final step of Chucky's ritual, and the rest of his cult finally wakes up. But before he can rejoin them in episode 8, An Affair to Dismember, which is a parody of the 1957 film An Affair to Remember, Andy shows up at the Wheeler household to get in his rival's way. So Chucky just decides to hide.
He had a gun. I hate guns. They're like my Achilles heel, along with axes, fire, and those big industrial-sized fans.
To quote the Chuck himself, these are all actual examples. He was killed by an axe in Seed, he was thrown in the fireplace in 1, and he was chopped up by a big industrial fan in 3, which, as you probably know, happens after most of the movie takes place at Andy's military school. I find it interesting how Chucky has turned the tables against Andy since then. Near the end of Child's Play 3, Andy is essentially backed by an army and Chucky has to flee. Now, Chucky is the one with an army behind him. There might even be a reference to this in the dialogue.
We're gonna party like it's 1999.
According to my calculations in the Chucky timeline video, 1999 was the year that Child's Play 3 took place. So by saying this, he's essentially saying that they're going to kill Andy. The new recruits have a few questions about the operation.
Is there an age limit on potential victims? Well, let's just say nobody under the age of 5 or 6. Fair enough?
Poor Andy was 6 years old in the original Child's Play, so I guess he just missed the cutoff. As Tiffany brings down some cookies to the party, we hear the song Sick Bubblegum by Rob Zombie. I wanted to point this out for 2 reasons. 1, Rob Zombie also did the song Living Dead Girl for Bride of Chucky, which is essentially the theme song of Tiffany, so it's fitting that she'd be listening to some Rob Zombie in her own house. 2, earlier in this video I talked about a whole lot of Halloween references present in this season, and Rob Zombie technically is a Halloween director. It's not all fun in glam metal though, as things would take a darker turn when Chucky orders Junior to kill Nika under suspicion that Tiffany is developing feelings towards her. The scene has an unexpected outcome when Tiffany turns and kills Chucky, or at least this particular incarnation of Chucky. It calls back to that flashback scene in the 80s when Charles Lee Ray and Tiffany first hooked up, and it looks like he's gonna kill Tiffany, but then unexpectedly turns and slashes up the other chick. So their relationship began with an unexpected change of allegiance, and now it's deteriorating with one. But then again, Chucky and Tiffany's relationship has literally always been toxic, so who knows if this really means anything. We flash back to the 80s again to see more of the night that Charles originally transferred his soul out of his human body. After a fight, Tiffany can be seen calling the police, and she asks for Mike Norris, who, as we know from the original movie, is the one to kill Charles Lee Ray at the toy store. So in a way, Chucky and Tiffany were each responsible for killing each other's original human form, because nothing says love like having your partner executed. I saw some people complaining that having Tiffany call the cops on Chucky in 1988 retcons the flashback from Curse of Chucky, but if you actually watch that scene, the new information doesn't actually change anything. Chucky accuses Sarah Pierce of ratting him out.
You told them about us?
But she never actually acknowledges that accusation.
There is no us.
Talking about the character relationships really makes me wonder if Tiffany knows who Nika actually is. She obviously knows that she's part of the Pierce family that Chucky brutalized in 2013. We see that much in Cult, but I don't know if she knows that Nika is the daughter of a woman that Chucky tried to have an affair with. It seems unlikely that Tiffany would develop feelings for the daughter of her biggest rival for Charles' affection. Anyway, Andy Barclay gets there a little bit too late for the party, but he is at least in time to save Devon, who is still captive there.
Another goddamn head. Why not?
Of course, this is a reference to Cult, where Andy keeps the head of a Chucky doll in captivity. This is just one of many examples I've brought up throughout this video of callbacks to the original 7 Chucky movies, and I've already discussed how the spotlight was more on Child's Play 2 than the others. What happens next is another example of that, only this time the circumstances are a little bit different. After being abandoned at the gas station, Kyle still manages to make her way to Hackensack, where she protects Jake and Lexi from the Chucky doll at Lexi's house. Then, for their own safety, she drugs them. Yes, 2 kids that she's never met, and she roofies them in the first 10 minutes. And I love how she doesn't even attempt to tell them, hey, you guys should just stay here, it's too dangerous, don't worry, Andy and I are gonna save your friend. No, she just goes straight to the roofies. Why is this her first idea? I mean, why does she even have roofies on her when she gets locked out of the car? Not a good look, Kyle. Not a good look. She makes her way to the Ray house on Sherwood Lane and unknowingly sets off the bomb, leading Jake and Lexi to believe that her, Andy, and Devon were inside during the blast, but they quickly learned that Devon got out alive. The next day is the Frankenstein benefit screening, where Tiffany, or as the public knows her, Jennifer Tilly, announces that these Chucky dolls will be given to children in need, for some reason. Seeing the yellow boxes stacked up like this should be a familiar sight to anyone who's seen Child's Play 2. It's a reminder of the maze of Good Guy doll products inside the Play Pals factory at the conclusion of the film. This is an appropriate time for this callback because what we're about to see would have history repeating itself. Lexi finds Junior in the back hallway at the movie theater with Chucky riding on his back at knife point, and she gives chase. This is just like the scenario at the end of Child's Play 2, where Andy was the one being threatened by Chucky, and Kyle was the blonde girl giving chase. Even the colors feel nostalgic here. The back section of the movie theater is red and yellow, just like the maze at the factory. I probably don't need to point this out, but since we're past the point where lengthening this video a little bit matters at all, you may have noticed that what we see in the movie Frankenstein corresponds to what's happening in our story. For example, we see Chucky sitting next to Caroline, his new best friend to the end, and on screen we see the scene where the monster befriends a little girl. I'm not going to point them all out because, again, I think this is pretty obvious, but if you didn't pick up on it, it's something that you can look out for on your next watch. And I know I keep coming back to this, but once again, it's the same concept seen in Scream, where the characters are watching Halloween and it's intercut with similar scenarios going on in Scream. By the way, Caroline is painted to be a complete sociopath who continues to sit there watching the movie even as everyone around her is being killed and pays no mind to her dad, who is slumped over next to her as Jake and Devon try to get her out of there. I think the creators realized this in editing and tried to add this line.
But what about Daddy?
You can just tell it was dialogue replacement. By the way, Chucky's method of murder in the movie theater is to hide underneath the seats and stab up through them. It's the same thing he tried to do with Mike Norris's car seat in 1988. Behind the screen, Junior describes how Chucky changed him and taught him to be a man. I noticed that he's wearing a hoodie similar to the one that he had matching with Lexi, but this one is different, it's green. Junior is no longer the boy he was when he and Lexi split up. His short time with Chucky has really changed him. Jake ends up in a physical altercation with his original Chucky in the movie theater, where Chucky's impressive strength relative to his small size is finally explained.
You're nothing against the power of the great almighty Dembella!
Which is kind of different from how he pronounced the great voodoo entity's name in the other movies. But don't worry, it's not like I made a whole video analyzing the history of Dembella where I took special care to pronounce it how they pronounce it in the movies.
You dared defy the almighty Dembella?
Yeah, that doesn't bother me at all. Jake defeats Chucky using his bare hands, putting him in the same camp as Andy, who pulled Chucky apart with his own hands at the end of Cult. I think this means that Jake is symbolically taking up the mantle as one of Chucky's greatest rivals alongside Andy. It's something that we've seen time and time again in this era of requels, the torch being passed to the younger generation. We see similar moments in other movies, new characters taking the reins from old characters, Luke Skywalker, Laurie Strode, Jigsaw, and Sidney Prescott. It seems like Jake gets especially offended when Chucky calls his relationship with Devon gay.
That is so gay.
Watch your fucking mouth. It's my boyfriend you're talking about.
Can someone explain this to me? Like, is it still considered to be offensive to be called gay if you're actually gay? Because if a gay person called me straight, I wouldn't be offended. I'd just be like, yeah, accurate. Let me get your sister's number. Despite defeating this Chucky, there's still a whole truck of Chuck about to go out to the children of America. This is a USX truck, the same fictional shipping company that delivers all of the dolls in the Cursed Seed arc. And Andy hijacks this truck, so he's no longer playing the victim. He's no longer the recipient of Chucky's terror, he's now in the driver's seat. However, we forgot about one thing. Remember this Tiffany doll that we saw momentarily at the end of Cult? So she's also got multiple incarnations running around at once. And just like in Bride, where she was first introduced, she's going to be responsible for ensuring that the Chucky dolls reach their intended destination. And she's going to do so by pointing a gun at the driver. As always, that was originally from Child's Play 2, where Chucky held Kyle at knife point and made her drive him around. Same situation, the male and female characters are now swapped. The answer about what happens to Andy and the truckload of dolls is left as a cliffhanger this season, but we do see the next step in Tiffany and Nika's relationship. In order to prevent Chucky from regaining control of Nika and potentially using it to attack her, Tiffany has amputated all of Nika's limbs. Obviously, this has less to do with practicality and more to do with Tiffany being the most insane character, but it's hard to imagine that Nika is going to be able to do much of anything next season in her current state. I'm guessing she'll be transferring her soul into the body of a doll, or perhaps into the body of Hollywood actress Fiona Dourif before long. And our season 1 comes to a close in the cemetery, where Jake, Lexi, and Devon would visit the graves of those that were lost. The season started with Jake listening to Devon's podcast, Hack and Slash, and it would come full circle as we hear the latest edition of that show.
How do we stand the chance against an enemy who disguises himself as our friend?
Back in Child's Play, Chucky disguised himself as a good guy doll and became Andy's best friend to the end. But now that phrase has taken a new meaning. This time, Chucky learned to manipulate their actual friend, Junior. I believe this is also the first time in the entire show that Jake isn't wearing that stupid necklace with the skull or doll head or whatever it is. I think this represents his change as a character. In the beginning, he doesn't have friends, and he spent all of his time collecting dolls and making art out of them. Now he has real people in his life. At the very end, we see that they're being watched, and this person puts their gloved hand on a tree, which is our only clue about this person's identity. In episode 7, Kyle bought 2 pairs of leather gloves for herself and Andy at the gas station mark. Then in episode 8, there's an explosion at the old Ray house on Sherwood Lane, and we're led to believe that those left inside perished. This includes Devon, Andy, and Kyle. We later find out that Devon and Andy were okay, but according to this headline in the Hackensack Post, there were fatalities reported in the explosion. We're left to assume that that means that Kyle didn't make it. When Andy later hijacks the truck, we do see him wearing the gloves, but then he drives away, presumably still a hostage of the Tiffany doll. This leads me to believe that the hand on the tree is actually Kyle, and the fatality reported in the Post was actually referring to the remains of the decapitated Chucky left in the building. If the remaining pieces were badly charred, police may have assumed that this was a baby caught in the explosion. So I think this is Kyle, mostly because it's hard to believe that they'd bring her back and then just have her die off screen like that. While that may be the end of the narrative for season 1, we're not done, because I've got to talk about the epilogue. The scene features Chucky lounging fireside and directly addressing the audience about the literary themes explored in Chucky season 1. This is yet another parallel to Frankenstein. More specifically, Bride of Frankenstein, which features a character insert for Mary Shelley, the author of the novel, in an intro scene where she sits fireside and explains the moral of the story before the main narrative actually starts. If you're a fan of my channel, you may remember me actually making a joke in my Bride of Chucky Things You Missed about how they should have done a similar fireside chat with Chucky creator Don Mancini. So I got a huge kick out of this epilogue scene, especially this line. Roll it.
The eternal questions explored by authors such as Austen, Shakespeare, Mancini.
Kinda makes me wonder if Don Mancini has been watching a little CZsWorld. Kinda curious if he rang that death bell. But one horror movie analysis channel that he's almost definitely been watching is our friend Dead Meat, who is most known for his world famous show, The Kill Count, where he counts up the kills in all your favorite horror movies. Cause that's exactly what Chucky does here.
And speaking of who died, let's review, shall we?
We also saw Chucky embrace the idea of a kill count during his last confrontation with Jake.
Eventually, they're gonna forget the names of everybody who died here tonight. All they'll remember is the number of people I killed. my body count.
This is something that we've been seeing more in the horror genre, the idea of a built-in kill count. We saw it in Us, and we see it getting much more attention here as a full-blown segment at the end of the season. I think the challenge is on for season 2, not only to surpass the 21 kills racked up over the first season, but to also break the record that it just set for most things you missed. To find out if season 2 pulls it off, make sure you subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell and select all notifications, and I will see you in the next season, assuming we both survive. Now, can anyone remember the name of the doll that this show is about?